So welcome to the second video in B06, our using Python packages course. Now we're going to look at revision of how to set up PyCharm and use it properly, as well as string manipulations in case you may have may need some revision. So remember, if you're looking at PyCharm, you can download it from this website and install it on your computer. Remember, you're looking at the free community version that you want to use. When you're installing it, note that you'll be given this prompt where you just hit run and let it install on your computers. You may get these other prompts about talking about the setup things, about details of setup in the Windows computer. Just hit no if there's a particular permissions request, and just hit next and install to go through the different steps. You'll need to install it on a local folder that's inside your space on the computer. So make sure that that is where you're installing it. Another option, and sometimes that's very good, especially for this revision part where you want immediate feedback on what you're doing, is to just log on to the cluster, launch Python 3, and then you'll get this interface, which you'll note you have these three greater than symbols at the start. That's the prompt where you can type in your code like name equals you. So that's our code, and this is our prompt here on the left-hand side. Remember, to exit this, you can just type quit as a function to exit, and you'll leave. Then we also have PyCharm. So with PyCharm, what you'll need to do first is set up a project and create a project there. And when you set up a project, you'll have a default script name called name.py. Py stands for Python scripts. If you get other prompts on you're using a Windows computer, just hit no and ignore them. What you'll see at the end is this, and I'll have some code inside there already, as you know. And note that there are lines along here, and then also it'll give you your folder location where you're actually doing this too. And there's also a menu across the top, which has different features as well, particularly file where you want to file save, for example. So you'll see here in comments in gray, there's comments at the start with the hash symbol at the start of each line, where there's comments, and there's code here that's written in different colors. So these colors mean different things. So def is a particular word that defines this function name. And then you see there's a colon at the end of this block of code, and that we have a delimited tab here at the start of this block of code, which just contains one line of actual code. And that's a print function to print the name that is produced. And then we see more code down here. It has a similar overall structure. It's an if statement with a colon at the end to define that as a block of code, an indentation here at the start, and then a single line belonging to that code. And then we have a space, free line of space at the end to indicate that block of code is finished. So what you can do is maybe set up a new project, and you might type in some basic code just to see what happens. And what you'll need to do is to make sure that you understand where the main menu is. If this is your script, your settings can be toggled as well via the main menu, and you write your code here. What's worth noting as well, that sometimes you'll find that you'll get feedback if you make a mistake. So that red exclamation indicates there's an issue, and what Python will do when it gives you an error, it'll give you the line number where this occurred. So it expected an expression on line 5. So if we go to line 5, this here, we have print with star, space, star, and 5. So these two asterisks should be together because we're having width to the power of 5 here. Width is already defined, and that's fine. But we have a space between the two asterisks, which PyCharm doesn't like. So it'll identify this error. It won't execute the code. It'll execute the code up to this line, but it won't execute that. And what we need to do is remove that space, and it will run fine. And note that we have this green arrow here where we can run and rerun our code to gradually get rid of these errors. If we're unsure about what is amiss, we can also use the help function. So if we want help on the length function, we can do that by submitting that to the function help. We can also search for that online, search for len and Python, and that should usually give us a lot of feedback on how that works. So just to revise our terminology, remember we have our Python file. We are talking about vectors, which are a list of numbers. We're talking about variables. This is something we define. So we might assign x to be the value of 5, and we do that with the equal sign to assign that x takes on that value. So y is sent over there and takes on the value of x. And we can redefine x if we assign x later in the script. A function takes an argument, such as x. Usually, sometimes it takes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arguments, and so on. So if that arrangements for functions take an argument in round brackets, we have libraries, and that we'll look at libraries more in this course, where we have packages of Python functions that we can use, and we import them using this special command here. So we might import NumPy, for example. And then we have our environment, so the things that we are using. So we're mainly using Windows machines, and we're using PyCharm and like the cluster. And then there's PyPy, the Python packaging index, which are libraries that are available for you. So if we look at strings, remember that we have this assignment to say for Alice and Bob, and we note that on the when we go to PyCharm, whatever interface we use, it will want the quotes to be these kind of simple quotes and not the slightly mangled PowerPoint or Word document quotes like this. So this will work for Alice, but this will not work for Bob, unfortunately. So we can then ask what I put in X. What is X? So we print with round brackets and no quotes or anything. However, we can add in other things, and we delimit the spaces, delimit the different features we want to print with a comma. So comma, space, ideally for clarity. And then we have a new line here. That's a return character. So putting the next part on the new line. So if a backslash to indicate that's a special character, and here we're putting an n to indicate that we're meaning a new line. So this will not print out a literal backslash n, it'll print in a new complete line. And then we have y there, and then a new line again. If we want other special characters, like we want an apostrophe, we put a backslash in front to indicate that it's a special character and not a quotation mark. So this will print your in the correct manner that we might desire. Beyond strings, we can aggregate them together as lists. So this may contain 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on items. It can also have multiple dimensions, as we looked at in the last course. To define a list, we can create an empty list with just square brackets. So like before, these are delimited by commas, and they can contain numbers, like this example here, or they contain strings. Ideally, we would not have both, though you may have situations where you've a mix of strings and numbers inside your variables, which effectively are treated like a bunch of strings. So if we can create an array called var1 here, we can see that it has how many 7 items in this array. And that's what we should note is that the indices, the array is given here, starts at 0. So the 0 is the first element, 1 is the second element, 2 is the third element, and so on. So 6 is the last element. So if we say print var1 with square brackets and 0, that points to this part of the array, and hence we'll print 3. If we change that to print var1 with a 2 inside here, that would print a value of 1, pointing to that part. If we said, okay, 4, we'd print 5 instead. Equally, we can count backwards from the start of the array. So 32 is the -1th element of the array, -2 is the -2th element of this array, and then we have -3, and so on back through to the other side of the array. So this is -7 at the start. So you can count using positive numbers on the way up or negative numbers on the way down. Another example is given here. We have an array with 5 numbers. They're delimited by the comma again, and this just contains numbers. So if we print our as element 0, we print 73. -1, we're going to go to 96, and -2, we're going to go to 61. And we see that visually here. If you think about this, is how we're pointing the 0th element is 73. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 here, pointing to 96, and we have this arranged in the other way here, So this is what we write our code as, and this is what we get on the right. So each of these point to these different elements. And if we redefined this array later, we change what the entries are here. We change this part, and these would point to new items. So that concludes our brief revision and introduction to the setup of PyCharm and how we use strings and lists and so on.